Welcome to Combat Theory Presents, a bi-weekly podcast about all things martial arts, fight science, and combat sports. I'm your host, Paul, the evil Professor Antonelli, and our latest episode starts right now. Hey, what's up, guys? Today it's Paul, the evil Professor Antonelli. I'm on another episode of Combat Theory Presents, and today I'm joined by the founder of Rear Naked Chicks, Jordan Novak. Jordan, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
That was as fast as I could possibly do that, so I'm doing pretty good, obviously.
Is speed the goal, or?
No, I feel like when I do a podcast, I always get a little nervous the first like 10 minutes for some reason. And then as like the episode goes, like when in the editing process, I can see myself like starting to like slowly come down and be like a normal human being. But the first like 5 to 10, I'm like, you can see that I'm having a massive anxiety attack. So I have that going for me, and that is super nice.
I think it's probably a little bit extra that this is literally the first conversation we have ever had. So,
well, that makes it even better. One, two, you're the first guest I've ever had that wasn't in the studio. Huh. So we built this really nice studio. And when I say we, I mean basically me, and I enslaved some of my students to put it together for me. And my first season, my whole goal was I wanted guests in the studio because I like conversations, and I feel like it's easier to have a conversation when you're like directly looking at someone and you're in the room with them, and there's a certain amount of body language and vibe and stuff like that. But I could not afford to fly you in. So
very important
today.
Sorry?
Where are you joining us from today?
I am joining you from Warwick, New York, which is in the Hudson Valley, like hour and a half-ish outside the city, depending on traffic.
You grew up in Warwick?
No, I'm actually originally from California, like all over California. And I Googled my perfect place to live, and I ended up in Warwick.
All right. Well, so Google does work for everyone, is what you're saying.
Basically.
Was it true? Was this the perfect place for you to live?
You know, as a California person, I had no idea what I was getting into in terms of winter. I spent 2 years going to boarding school in New Jersey, and then I just like pieced out of that because it was way, way too intense for me. But so I had like a little idea of what winter would be like. But yeah, the harsh reality of winter is that like it lasts from, I'd say, November till about the end of April here. So it's way more of a season than I thought it was going to be. Other than that, I love it.
I have this. So I lived as a kid, I lived in Massachusetts. And then although I was born in Florida, when I was in my early teens, I moved back to Florida. And, there's this certain romanticism about seasons, like whenever you watch a college film or something, it's always about like, oh, and the fall and the spring. And, when I went to college here, essentially we just wear shorts, all year long in college. Right. And my dad got sick a couple of years ago, and I had to go back to Massachusetts. And it's the first time I had gone back to Massachusetts in like 20 years. And when I first got there, it started to snow, and it was beautiful. I was like, this is amazing. And then it kept snowing, and it was a blizzard. And then they like salted the roads, and everything turned black and dirty and gross. And we were stuck there. And I was like, there's nothing nice about this. This is not enjoyable at all. And I will
say that discovering jiu-jitsu made winter a lot more tolerable for me because it's an indoor sport and because it gave me a place to be every single day. And I wasn't just like holing up in my house doing nothing for, all those months. So especially because it's hot too. Like most winter sports are freezing, and I'm just not about it. I used to snowboard and stuff, and I just like, I hate it.
One of my buddies tried to move to Chicago and open a school. And when he moved to Chicago, it was like during the polar vortex. And he literally moved there. He was there like 3 weeks. He was like, nope, changed my mind and moved right back. He's like, there's no way I'm going to get up in the winter and go train, but, can get on the train or whatever. But, to each his own, I guess. Jordan,
Florida heat's pretty intense too, though. Like I lived in Cocoa Beach for a year and a half.
Okay.
So not too far from you. And I was pregnant with my first kid when I moved there. It was like the middle of July.
Yeah, that was hot. We for many years we trained here in a facility that had no air conditioning, that was basically a steel warehouse. In and you'd go in there like noon in your gi, and it would be like 110 degrees in the room, and I'd drop like 9-10 pounds of water during like a 2-hour training.
I actually think ghee should be illegal during the warm months.
I tried to over and over and over again. I said like, hey, let's go no gi all summer. But the problem is that, Worlds falls kind of like right at the beginning of summer, so it was like people always wanted to like train for Worlds, and then we're training for this and we're training for that. And it's just,
I stopped competing in the gi like a year and a half into competing. Like I'm good.
How did you get involved in martial arts?
I guess martial arts in general, I was put into when I was a kid. I did like Taekwondo that I didn't take seriously at all for a bunch of years. And then the only thing that I really took from it was that I liked this thing that we did once in a while that they called jujitsu wrestling. And I mostly, like, I was an athlete in general as a kid. I played soccer, softball, like, just basically any sport I could get thrown into. I got really into volleyball. And then as an adult living out here in Warwick, there's just like not a ton of sports access. So I was driving like an hour each way to play volleyball on a league that I didn't really like that much. And I was actually in a bar with my ex at the time, and this guy was just drinking and, chatting it up. And we asked him what he was doing. He said he was waiting for his son in jujitsu class. And I was like, I remember liking that as a kid. I should try that out. Like, it's closer and I could go more often. And I got obsessed
with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself to have that kind of personality where you get like really obsessed with things, or?
Yeah, I mean, if I like it, I definitely will be really passionate about the things I care about.
So how long now have you been involved in jiu-jitsu?
So I started training, it'll be 4 years in January. So like a little over 3.5 years at this point. And
you're purple belt, correct?
Yeah. So I got from white to blue really quickly because I trained every single day. I think I missed maybe 5 days that year. There was this period of time where I trained like 113 days in a row, and I only stopped because I got my sternum broken, and I only stopped for 1 day.
Solid.
Obsessive.
Yeah, obsessive. It's funny because I've had the privilege of being in the room with a lot of world champions, and they have like a certain amount of like absolute obsession, singular focus, like almost to a level of like, you could maybe say it was somewhat unhealthy to the level of obsession that they have. So I get that, like I'm always telling my students, and something that I struggle with myself is like, I think to be really great at something, you need to have like almost a singular focus, where that's the thing that you're thinking about. That's the thing that you're doing day after day, night after night, which is increasingly harder in our society because we seem to be drawn in many directions, and we have all this stuff out there that we can kind of distract us.
I think for me, the timing was part of it. Like I started going through a divorce right around the same time I started training. So like having something to focus on that was healthy to like keep myself sort of above board was good. But honestly, that singular focus thing you talk about, I don't think that it is the healthiest thing for most people. I think the people that I know who have been that singularly focused aren't really that happy overall. They might be amazing at jujitsu, but they don't have super balanced lives. And to me, like, I want to be great at something, and I'll get like obsessive, but I also always have this natural balancing out phase where I'm like, okay, like I've gone so hard for so long, I'm about to burn out. What can I do? And then I have to bring some balance back.
So when did you you went to blue pretty quickly. When did you get involved in competition?
Pretty much right off the bat. I actually had no desire to compete. I wasn't thinking about it at all. But the gym that I was at was very competition focused. And when I felt like there was a lot of encouragement and like I was doing pretty well, it was pretty natural for me to be like, sure, I'll join. Like it's a very team motivated thing when everybody's doing it. So I think I was probably training maybe 6 months tops, maybe less when I started competing.
You feel like you were properly prepared for competition?
I mean, at white belt, sure, I guess, there's really nothing that prepares you for like mental strain of like a combat sport competition. But, yeah, I mean, I was just one of those people who picked it up pretty well. So I did fairly well right off the bat.
What do you think your biggest takeaway was from when you transitioned to being a student to being more of a competitor? What did you, was it what you expected it to be?
Honestly, some of the love of it went away for me, which was unfortunate. I loved the environment of jiu-jitsu, and I loved training and getting better. And I loved watching myself get better as compared to other people in the training room. But because I wasn't just a competitor, but I was like, there was a lot of value placed on me as a competitor, and we were a newer gym. I felt so much pressure to perform. And I've always been kind of like an overachiever, had to get really good grades or I didn't feel good enough. So, I just felt like I was going to fail the people I cared about if I didn't win. And that was a huge amount of pressure for me. And I just kept pushing through it because not competing was worse than losing. So I had to find some way to like counteract that feeling.
Yeah. Are you still competing?
I mean, I don't have anything on the books right now. I don't know how many people who are listening have like followed my saga, but I left my gym because I disagreed with the way they handled basically like a predator in the community. And I found a new gym that I love, and they actually host like a really cool super fight series that I will definitely take part in once they have that up and running again. But like in terms of traveling and all that, I'm actually thinking about starting like just a small version of my own gym. I'm going to rent some mat space out from somebody else and like have just a women's group that meets up. So that's really more my focus right now, is going to teaching.
So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about the creation of Rear Naked Chicks. What was the kind of idea behind that? How did it start?
So originally it was me and two other girls. When I started training, I was the only woman for like 5 months. And I basically bothered other dudes to bring their girlfriends and bothered those girlfriends until they joined. And at the time it was really me and these two other girls. And we were the only women who were like consistently training. And they would joke a lot. They were around the same size, and they would always be talking and like just laughing during rolls. And they kind of brought this idea to me. Like, we always thought it'd be really funny to have a podcast of the stuff that we say. And that didn't really go anywhere, but we just kept talking about it, and eventually morphed into the idea of an Instagram. And we started talking about names. And when Rear Naked Chick, like when I landed on that as an idea, that was when it really took off. I like immediately got the handle on Instagram and TikTok, and really they wanted to do Instagram, and I just wasn't that into Instagram. And I said, cool, like we'll all do it together, but I want to do TikTok. Yeah. And TikTok is where we really took off.
Yeah, I think that. So that's where I came. That's where I started watching your videos, was on TikTok, because the algorithm has hooked me, and I can't get away from that addiction. When you first started making content, did you find that it was exceptionally easy to make? Did you guys do a lot of planning in advance for it, or was it kind of just off the cuff?
When we first started doing it, there was a lot more planning involved. Getting used to the platform took a while, the editing software that's in there, like the ideas that I would have didn't always like translate, but eventually it got to the point where I was using TikTok so much because I was a content creator that all I was doing was just saving sounds. And by the time we got together, and the girls like down the line, they started thinking of things too, but we would just get together and there would just be like a list of things that I was ready to record, and we would just bang them out really fast. And then we would have content for like weeks on end.
Yeah. So kind of similar when I first started my YouTube channel, we would do all the setup and preparation, and we had like multiple camera angles, and I make things too complicated. But I found that it was a lot easier for me to record like 8 videos in a row than to record just one, because we were recording one video, and then it would have taken like 25 minutes to set up and 25 minutes to break down, and like the video would be like 8 minutes, you know. So
so much the like high content or high quality production value doesn't even hit, and it's just some stupid thing you do that took 30 seconds that is what goes viral.
I had this thought on this video where I wanted to talk about this concept in like stand-up fighting, which is called carouseling, which I kind of like coined, which is, you know, I did a whole video on it, which if anybody is watching and you care, but essentially what carouseling is that for some reason in stand-up fighting, we're always told to kind of like move to the left. And what ends up happening is that early students just start making this like ridiculous kind of like circle around and around and around and around and around and around. And they look like they're on a carousel with their partner, which in a training environment isn't horrible. But then when I take that into, we fight in a cage or we fight in a ring, you're in a great, you know, like ring position or cage position. And then you start to circle off for zero reason. And then your back's against the cage because you circled into it. So I did this whole video where I explained that, like, don't ride the carousel. Like, you know, fight movement, stand-up movement is like on the cross. It's linear, you know, and I paid a bunch of money to take like me and a couple of my friends to like an amusement park so that we get on a carousel and we can film on the carousel. And I was like, man, this video is so cool, bro. It's going to be the best video ever. And I don't think I think maybe 800 people watched it. And then like to juxtapose that, I was like sitting at my house one night and I was annoyed with one of my students because I didn't like the shin guards he had. And I was like trying to explain to him via text, like, this is what I like in a shin guard. This is what I don't like in a shin guard. And then I was like, screw it, I'll just make a video. And I made like a really basic video, like sitting in my office with one camera and just like, hey guys, here's the difference in like shin guards and why I'd buy this and I wouldn't buy that. And that video has like 12,000 views over the video that I spent like all this money on that has like 800 views. And then I have a girl that does that handles like our Combat Theory Instagram, and she'll do like a 30-second video and it'll get like 60,000 views. And I'll be like, I actually hate you. I actually hate you right now.
I mean, the stressful part of the reason that those types of video, like if you've got a girl and she, you know, just happens to be in a combat sport and people think she's cute and it takes off for that reason, it doesn't translate into any kind of viewership or like dedicated base. And that can be really frustrating. Like so many things that we've had that have gone off are because we're barefoot. And it's like, it's a barefoot sport. It's so annoying to deal with these feet people. I have every content filter imagined. Comments can't refer to like foot locks or ankle lock, no toes, foot emojis. It's all blocked. And I could show you just screen recordings of pages and pages of comments, like just reporting on the content of our feet.
Guys are so creepy, man. Why do they do this? Yeah,
I have to wonder.
Word, right? You know, it helps to be like, listen, like, I hate to say this, but obviously, like, you know, if you're an attractive person, you're going to get more views. And if you're like, you know, I always go back to, so I do some lecturing at the university here. And I do like I talk to some undergrads about exercise science and stuff like that. And there was this video that had like 10 million views or something, and it was about abdominal exercise. And this guy was shredded. He was beautiful. He was an Adonis. You could see every muscle in his body. And when you first start watching the video, he's kind of explaining like why he's doing this abdominal exercise, and he's using terminology. He's using like the clinical terminology. And I start watching it, and I'm like, oh, this is a pretty good video. It's got like, you know, 12,000 views. And then really quickly I discovered that although, yes, he was using clinical terminology, he was actually using completely the wrong clinical terminology.
Oh, boy.
Describing muscles that were not in his abdominal area, and, you know, was showing exercise that was probably detrimental to success. But the man was beautiful, and people were like, this is the greatest video I've ever seen in my life. His feet were not in it, though. So imagine if his feet were in it. Oh, well, man, I mean, 1 billion more views.
if you're in martial arts and you go on YouTube, you'll see that there are all these women doing what they're claiming is jujitsu. And it's essentially like softcore porn in a sports bra. And it's really upsetting for us who like are just trying to do our sport and be funny. And we have a name that's cheeky, like Rear Naked Chicks, and people think that's what they're coming to us for. And it's like, we have never produced a single ounce of content that would suggest that's what we're doing. And they just keep demanding it.
Yeah, but I think also too that like, so we have kind of a niche market, obviously like the statistics on how many people are involved in martial arts is really hard to find. But, I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't get the reference. They don't get like Rear Naked Choke,
Of course.
They just don't get it. I like, even I was explaining to one of my female clients the other day that you were coming on my show, and I named the show, and she was kind of like, at first she was kind of like, I don't know, like she was a little bit like, well, what is that? And I'm like, oh, well, it's Rear Naked Choke, and then she was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's cool. That's funny. But can we like pierce the veil a little bit and go behind that? So, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. What's the kind of viewership on your TikTok videos?
I mean, it really, really ranges. So like anything that gets under 10,000 views is a dud. Like those are rare. But the algorithm does fall out of love with you if you aren't posting all the time. So like when I've had like lulls and I've come back with something that I know typically will go off, it's like, it's just dead. I would say most things get in the tens of thousands of views. There's a hefty number that have gotten in the hundreds of thousands, and then there's just like a sprinkling of ones that are in the millions.
Yeah. And you, not to go too deep into it, but you recently had some controversy. And I think some of the people that were kind of commenting on that controversy were saying that you were doing this for money. But you don't really make a whole lot of money off those, do you?
I mean, like if we're going to be like really blunt about it, I lost followers on TikTok specifically because this isn't our normal content. So like people who wanted to see funny, silly TikToks with girls making jujitsu content were like annoyed that we had opinions, and they were unfollowing left and right. I mean, it was only when it came down to it, like 200 or 300, but like, it was not a boost. And the actual income made, like, any profit that I had went to the girls when they left. I've never taken $1 from Rear Naked Chicks. It just keeps itself alive.
This is something that I struggle with a bit too. I created Combat Theory, right? Now, Combat Theory is kind of complex because we have a gym called Combat Theory. We have a fight team that fights under Combat Theory. We have a YouTube channel that is called Combat Theory, and we have a podcast called Combat Theory Presents. I really don't like it. I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't like it when gyms name themselves after themselves. You know what I mean? Like, my name is Paul Antonelli, right? Like I didn't want to open Paul Antonelli Gym, right? And then some guy goes and fights and he's representing Paul Antonelli. I mean, yes, he's representing me, sure. But, when I created the brand Combat Theory, the whole idea behind it was like, I wanted it to be something that was like, had broad appeal and wasn't like, Jordan Novak martial arts, but I think it's funny because a lot of times I try to be very inclusive. I'm super inclusive. Like I'm always trying to get people involved in my ideas, and when I came up with the YouTube channel, I tried to get a bunch of my students to like, hey, help me make this YouTube channel. You can be in the YouTube channel with me. And same thing. When I created the podcast, I was like trying to get a bunch of my friends to be involved in the podcast, and none of them had like skin in the game, So like I invested a bunch of money into doing X, Y, and Z. And then when it came down to like the grittiness of it or the brass tacks of it, and it was like, hey, can we do this on like Thursday? Oh, well, I don't have really availability that day. Okay. Can we do it on Saturday? I don't have availability that day. Okay. I don't either. I'm making time for this. Like, is this something that you're able to make time for? And I think that for me, the second season of Combat Theory Presents is going to be like less inclusive. And I hate to say that because I really believe that this is a team sport, even though it's singular. When you compete, it's singular. And that's something I think a lot of gyms and a lot of people don't understand. But I get you, man. That's hard. Did you now that I know that you're kind of partnering, because again, when you're making martial arts content, it's very hard to make martial arts content by yourself. I don't know if you've ever, I try to make videos by myself and I kind of look like I'm just, schizophrenic fighting someone that's not there. So now I see you're making more content now with one of your friends.
Yeah, so the whole controversy happened surrounding my boyfriend's sister, who used to train at another Henzo school nearby, and she dated while she was 18 the owner, who was 40 at the time, who's much older now, and he was like super abusive and stalked her and all these other things, and she had never said anything about it. So she told her story on our podcast, which ultimately ended in me calling attention to the fact that the RGA now had, full proof that multiple of his black belts had told me that they knew about it. And basically at the end of the day, nobody decided to do anything. And Henzo even legally sided with him insofar as he got involved in a legal letter that was sent to McDojo Life for covering the story. So I had a problem with the fact that these guys knew that this was a predator, and they had a problem with the fact that I said something about having a problem with it. So the girls that I originally did the podcast with were given an ultimatum, and they chose to stay within the RGA. And the girl that I made the podcast with, whose story it was, is still my boyfriend's sister, and she still trains. And so now we're making content together.
Was there any debate about was there some debate about in your head, or at least with the other girls, about whether or not you would continue doing Rear Naked Chicks?
I don't think there was really any doubt ever. I had always been sort of the spearhead of everything. I ran all the taxes, and I posted all the content, and I created most of it, and I hosted everything. So it really didn't make any sense for either of them to take it over. Not to mention, they just weren't allowed to be associated with the brand at all anymore if they were going to stay at their gym. So it wasn't going to happen. And they wanted me to keep doing it. They believed in the message that, supposedly this is what they said. They wanted me to keep on fighting this fight. They just couldn't be involved because they couldn't
fight. We're not going to do it.
It was too costly to them, but I can do it. So
do you, hindsight being 2020, do you think that you would have done everything the same way?
Yeah, I even down to they knew what the possibility was of getting basically excommunicated, because our coach found out before I had ever even recorded the podcast what was going to happen, and I offered them a way out. So to find out that their integrity was such that they would tell, that they would go through the whole process of posting all this and saying they believe in it, and then to back out when it actually did end up costing them something. I had to find that out that way. I never would have known that that was the case unless we had gone through that. And I still feel like it was really important what we did.
Are you guys friends outside of the gym still, or you're not so much?
No, that I wish them well. I harbor no ill will towards them. But to me, when you have that close of a friendship and somebody steps away in such a public and I don't know, it was just a really hurtful way to me, to accept that ultimatum, because I had never given it, right? They kept training there. I never had a problem with it. But when their coach was like, well, you can't be associated anymore, they said, okay.
When you said that you were going to, your coach knew that you were going to kind of do that story in advance. Did he have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, he was completely freaked out. He said, you can't disparage another Henzo gym owner. Yeah. I might not be allowed to train there anymore if I kept doing it. He said, maybe he's better now. We don't know. I don't want to ruin this man's life. I mean, he had a million stories, and then he went back on them. And then he was like, oh, I had no idea it was this bad once we released all the text messages and everything. But then he was like, well, I'm not involved. How dare you involve me? And I'm like, dude, you really are involved though.
So I've been a fan since kind of the beginning of your, of you guys posting, and although I don't pay for your Patreon, I probably should. I'm sorry. I'm a bad friend. I'm a bad fan, is what I'm saying. I don't have a Patreon. Maybe if I had one, I would pay for yours. But you should. If you guys are watching at home, Rear Naked Chicks is putting out really, really good content. And I would really encourage anyone that loves jujitsu or is interested in jujitsu or just interested in a different perspective in martial arts to look at your content.
Thanks.
I remember early on though, I feel like I don't, and maybe I'm an old man. So maybe I'm getting old and I just imagine things sometimes. I remember someone had asked in a comment if you felt like women in the sport were like marginalized or whatever. And I feel like you guys at the time said like you did not feel that that was the case. Does that sound familiar to you?
I don't remember it specifically, but I totally believe it. And that's the thing about when you're in one of these, especially these like really kind of culty type gyms, is that you just believe everything that's said to you, and you don't have any reason not to, because most people who find jujitsu don't have this whole culture that they're aware of. They just have their gym.
Yeah, I think that's first off, I joke all the time about how, I'm creating like a cult. And I think that this is something that, Rob from McDojo Life and I had like a pretty big debate about this, where I like loyalty, right? Like there's this weird thing about loyalty where I think and I'm speaking for Rob here, I think Rob's kind of perspective is that gym loyalty is the worst thing ever, because all of the abuses, all of the things that happen in the environment are based on loyalty, and listen, I can say, financially, I've been abused by coaches in the past where like, hey, Paul, I'm a little short on money. Is there any way you could, hit me up with like $50? And you're like, yeah, I love you. I care about you. You're my coach. And then, $800, $900 in, you're like, man, I got to cut you off, bro. I can't be giving you anymore. So like I've had that, I've had maybe mentally where I've had coaches that kind of abused me mentally, where they were, maybe somewhat toxic, which I also struggle with now, because I know that sometimes as a coach, you have to have hard conversations with people that you don't want to have. There's just a way to do that that's appropriate, and there's a way to do that that's not appropriate. I have had that happen. I kind of understand Rob's side of it, which is that loyalty is very dangerous in our sport. But also, as someone that was a competitor, as someone that is building a competitive team, I also know that loyalty is kind of important in a way that, like, to be successful as a team, we have to kind of be loyal to each other.
So the last thing you said is kind of the key there, though. You have to be loyal to each other. And I think that the main thing that Rob is talking about is when people are loyal to a gym as though it's some sort of like a higher up entity that they all give praise and money and belief and support to. But the problem occurs when that support isn't returned, when something bad happens, and rather than, surround the person in the gym with, that support, they're pushed out and ostracized. Like, that is so common in our sport that I really think that's probably what he's referring to.
Yeah, I get that. But it's this kind of like, okay, so I'll give you an example. If I have a young competitor that I think has a lot of opportunities and like is doing well, and I want to foster that relationship, sometimes that means that I'm going to have to like financially help them. Whether that means I'm gonna have to pay for them to go to tournaments, or I'm gonna have to pay for them to, especially in like Muay Thai or MMA, where I might have to buy them gear, or I might have to pay for travel. I'm doing that because I care about them and I'm loyal to them and I want to see them be successful. And I know that the limiting factor on their success might be like financial. And if it means that I have to pay $500 for a plane ticket, that's really not the end of the world if, they care about the team and they're giving back. And also I know that, when a competitor goes and competes, win or lose, they come back to the gym, they're hopefully going to stay, and they're going to bring back a lot that they learned from that. Right. But I will also say that I get frustrated as hell when I've invested a bunch of energy and time and money into someone, and then for whatever reason they decide like, oh, I'm gonna go train at this other gym, and it's like, oh, okay, all right.
Well, I mean, I think that for whatever reason is kind of the part that matters, right? Like if it is because they've been sort of offered something that they find, is like a self-serving and not appreciative of whatever, cooperation they've had from you before, like that could be a very like, taking advantage of the situation type move. But also, people are people, and just because you have invested something in them doesn't mean that it's going to be the right path for them moving forward. And like, I think that there is a balance there. I was the most loyal to my gym. Like, I would have died for my coach. If you had asked me a year ago if I would be where I am right now, I would not have believed you. Like never in a million years would this have happened.
Yeah, but I think also too, and I hate to say that, I think that, I remember kind of early on, I had a conversation with either Cal Kincaid or one of my other friends, and I was like, this is a dangerous path. Like, this is not going to go super well for Jordan, because because I've been in the environment a really long time. And
You mean early on like talking about Carl?
Yeah. Because I've been in the environment a really long time, and I have fought many battles in the avenue that you are pursuing, right? But I'm 6'2", I'm 200 plus pounds, I'm like a dude, right? And it's a boys club, and I can have kind of behind the scenes arguments with people, and I'm not going to get ostracized as much, right? But I will tell you that today, the reason that I have my own gym is because of the fact that I didn't like what was going on in a partnership that I was in. Right. And the only way for me to gain 100% control of my environment was to not have a financial backer, not have anybody else that could say how I run my business, right? And I think that if you look at the people that are excelling in my program, they're young women, they're young people in general, but I have a lot of girls that compete for me, that fight for me, that fight for us, that represent combat theory, right? Because I'm fostering an environment where they can feel safe and comfortable, and they can come in and train, and they don't have to worry about problems, right?
That was one of the things that I thought was so valuable about what we were doing, is that it did give gyms an opportunity to say things, like it gave them a talking point and to bring it up. And I'm not even exaggerating, hundreds of messages of people saying like, thank you so much for doing this. Like, I never knew how my coach felt about this, but it brought it up in training, and to say like, it was a bad decision or a dangerous thing. That would only be if I would have been okay with being in that environment and staying quiet about it. And it had bothered me since I had that first interaction with Carl, when people were telling me that he was creeping on me, and then nobody did anything about him. Like, it had been bothering me for years. So this idea that like, you can just ignore the bad things and like hide what and just protect your own, and not stand up for like the people that very likely are going to be hurt by you withholding the information you have. It's like, it just never was going to sit right with me. And I'm going to eventually have my own space, which is going to be the answer, which is the same reason that the guy who I'm training under now has his own space. Like, it's kind of like the Catholic Church and the Protestants,
Maybe, maybe not. Okay. I'm with you.
But like, there's this whole, like, let's protect everyone no matter how bad they are thing. And like, trust me, not just the guy we were talking about. So many different Henzo affiliate members had messaged me saying like things that had happened that weren't taken care of. And, it's a cultural thing within that organization.
Sure. Do you think that, I've been involved in mixed martial arts gyms for a really long time now. But I've always been kind of the stand-up guy. I'm the striking coach. I'm the stand-up coach. I'm the, I'm cornering and I'm working with the professional fighters, but my focus is kind of like stand-up fighting, and every gym I'm in has a jiu-jitsu program, and they compete in IBJJF or whatever organizations. Jiu-jitsu is very association based. Like, it almost requires, to compete at the higher level tournaments, you have to kind of it's hard to be like a freelance fighter, wherein my side of it, I don't need to have a association backing. I don't need to have I don't have to represent some whatever coach somewhere else. I could, but I don't have to. We're very segmented when it comes to striking across the country. do you think that the power of the association is kind of why some of these abuses go on?
Absolutely, which is why I think that you have to pay attention to what you invest in, as even at the bottom of the chain, a consumer, to say that like, I train at a Henzo gym, but it doesn't matter what Henzo does. It's kind of bullshit. Like, if you know bad things are happening and this guy is protecting and like nurturing the careers of literal predators, and that you will not be protected if anything happens to you within that organization that was perpetrated by a member of it, like, you're just helping jujitsu stay super toxic. And I mean, the personal responsibility is a lot smaller at the end of like a white belt who knows nothing. It's almost zero because you know nothing. But as somebody who owns a gym and puts that name on the wall, I feel like the onus is on them to talk to Henzo himself and say like, you know, I don't want this perception. I need to see that things are being done when problems occur within these gyms, like that we're handling them in a way that is, you know, like morally not completely fucked. Like,
No, and this is a big problem in general because, you know, I think that obviously all industries have abuse, right? Like without any question, you brought up the Catholic Church earlier. Every industry's got abuses, right? There's an article that Rob at McDojo Life's talking about this week where an instructor in California molested a bunch of kids, right? Like there's always going to be abuses in industries, you know? And it's funny because I have sat down with a lot of females that are involved in jiu-jitsu, and this is not something that they want to talk about. This is not something that they're comfortable talking about. And in fact, I had a high-level jiu-jitsu competitor female that came on and did an episode in the studio. And we were just kind of, you know, like having a nice conversation, and it was very like non-outlined. And she kind of brought up the subject of that she was taking a break from training, and that, you know, as a high-level female competitor, that she had kind of felt uncomfortable in a lot of experiences that she had had over the years, and she wasn't really sure how to. And to be honest with you, she hadn't had anything that was like, oh, I don't want to minimize this. She hadn't had anything that was like, you know, too much, you know, but there were weird things that were said mostly and kind of given the ick by people over the years. And we did an episode about an hour and a half. And, you know, like I told you before, if there's something that you decide that you don't want to talk about or this or that, just let me know afterwards. And like maybe like 3 or 4 days went by, and she messaged me and she's like, hey, listen, like, I don't like that episode. I think that it'd be best if we were to edit all of that out. And I would like to, you know, I just, in case I go back and get back into competition, I just don't want to get kind of effed over because of it. And then I literally tried to like go in and edit out all of that. And it was such a significant chunk of the conversation that the podcast would have been like 10 minutes. Like, hey, how are you? Good. Great to see you. Bye. It's crazy, you know.
But I think it really, it just goes to show how, first of all, how prevalent the problem is, because I don't know a single woman who's been in grappling for more than a handful of years who hasn't had a bad experience. But I also only know a handful who have ever said anything. And of the ones that I do know, the vast majority were ostracized from their gym because of speaking up.
Well, absolutely. I mean, listen, I can tell you a handful of girls that have come to me personally where they had problems with somebody in the gym, and I would bring it to whoever was involved in leadership or, you know, my partners or whatever. And I would say, hey, this is what happened. This is the kind of proof behind it. I don't like this. I don't want this person here. Right. And I was, instead of being given like, yeah, no, well, I agree with you. You were giving, I've heard some dudes say some wild things to me, right? Up into and including, this is a real story. I had a blue belt that was, you know, regularly like sexually like harassing, but more in like, hey baby, let me be your boyfriend. Let me buy you stuff. Let me do this for you. And, you know, going into our group chats and like texting people, like cold texting people like, hey, maybe you know me, da 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 da. And a member of my gym came to me and showed that to me, and I was like, oh, this is not gonna fly for me. And when I went to kind of the leadership at the time, many years ago, I was told that women need the ability to say no, and that if you take that away from them, guys don't learn how to navigate the environment. And I was like, this is the stupidest shit that I've ever heard of.
I mean, especially in a grappling environment where, like, first of all, having been a woman my entire life and grown up knowing, what it is like to say no, a lot of people do not take it well. One of the reasons we're so hesitant to say no, or that we would rather have somebody do like interface for us, is that a lot of times rejecting a man results in him getting really angry, aggressive, and violent towards us.
I think also too, just to say something about like, I think generally, and I know this is going to sound kind of whatever, I think generally people want to be nice to each other. And a lot of times I think what happens is that when guys are making unwanted advances, even then, when it's an unwanted advance, a lot of times the other person feels like, oh, I don't want to be a really bad person. I don't want to make this person feel bad. I just don't want this interaction. And they don't know how to, it's like they don't know how to say like, fuck off, dude. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and like that, I'm well aware of that because of the fact that at all of my time at that gym, I ended up being the person who was relaying the message often. A lot of girls came to me with their concerns and I would relay them to higher ups, or even men at one point had been harassed by one guy. And I just always, I'm a mom, like mom was I swear to God, we had a guy who was kissing people. So like during rolls. So like, that there's sort of two sides to that, right? The fact that people felt they were comfortable to come to you means that it was clear that you were a person that they could talk to about that. But the leadership at a gym, if you want to actually be proactive about this, needs to have a conversation and a set of conduct guidelines, and like refer to them, talk about it, make sure people know.
We have this kind of, it's crude, I'll be honest with you, saying in our gym, which is don't fuck your brothers and sisters. This is family. Don't fuck your brothers and sisters, please. It's Florida, so maybe I have to explain that a little bit heavier sometimes, but that's the way it is for me. But that's top down. Okay. Like I have great friendships in my gym, but I'm never going to, like, I have had in the past, I've had, girls that maybe there was a bit of chemistry and there was a bit of whatever and that came into the gym. And I was very clear about the fact, like, this isn't gonna, like, I think you're great, but like, this isn't the kind of the perception that I want to create in my gym. And there's been girls in the past that trained with me for a while and then left. And then maybe there was a little bit of whatever. And I was like, it's kind of weird for me still, even though it's been a long time since you trained in my gym. I just don't want that perception. And I've seen it go terribly wrong so many times, even when both people are on the level and they're doing the right things, because it's uncomfortable if something doesn't work.
I mean, and this is why leadership needs to be so important in all of this. Like there have to be rules, there have to be, clear ways of handling things, because people are going to connect, but there's also always going to be people trying to take advantage, and whoever's in charge is going to be the one who decides whether it's safe or not. Like there's really no way for the people who are just attending classes to keep themselves safe from this.
I always say, like, there's 2.38 billion people of the opposite sex in the world. So like, if you want to meet somebody, I'll help you, but like this, at the gym's probably not the best place for that. And I struggle with that too, because I think that obviously, where do you meet people? You meet people in your hobbies, you meet people in your work, you meet people if you're in school still. Like if you're, training in the gym every night and you meet someone that you find interesting, like obviously, like I want you to be happy. You want to be happy. We all want to be happy, right? I just don't want you to. I've even seen it where two people had a nice relationship, and then when it doesn't work out, then they both feel weird about coming to the gym. And like, that's not good for our business either. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I get that.
Right. Like as a business owner, I mean, I don't know what the ultimate way to like weed out all potential awkward circumstances is, but you can at least get rid of like the super predatory stuff by making a culture where when something bad happens, a woman's not afraid to talk about it. She should be, supported, and people should gather around her and make sure that whatever thing happened doesn't happen again. The fact of the matter is that the general feeling is more like what you had, where you're like, oh God, this isn't going to go well. That's fucked up. When some horrible, horrible abuse of power is taking place and the general sentiment is everybody shut up. Everybody just look the other way. Just like, don't get involved. That's how we breed predators and we keep them in power in this sport. And it's just like, women aren't going to have a place to train if that's what takes over. It's just not cool.
Okay. So now that you have kind of come out of this experience and you are training somewhere else now, and you are kind of playing with the idea of maybe opening your own space or having a women's only environment. If what is it? This is something I struggle with, right? Because when people come to me and they ask about like their kids training or their family members training, if I know the gym, then I can make a lot of like, oh, that's a good idea, or that's a bad idea, whatever. If I know the people there, and even then, I don't know 100% what's going on behind the scenes, right? But like, what advice do you feel like you would give to parents, especially, or people out there that are thinking about training when they're walking into an environment that they don't really understand?
I mean, I think it's hard to take the word of other people who already train there because you have so many loyalties and they will kind of sidestep. I would take a look. I mean, if we're talking about kids, I would just take a look at the faces of the kids who are in there. Like, are they having fun? Are they happy to be there? Are they like getting beaten down and screamed at? I would definitely watch, like take the temperature yourself. Don't just take somebody else's word for it. I think like cleanliness and safety measures matter. I think a gym that has no policies about like shoes on mats and things like that are like obviously going to be really sketchy. But, more what I have been concerned with for like my professional career here has been where women are going to feel comfortable. And I think having women in leadership is a really good sign. Like having a woman who teaches classes at a minimum is a nice thing to see. A higher ranking women who have been there for a while is good. But the truth is the culture is so bizarre that I often have heard of women being the ones who pushed out another woman when she called attention to somebody who was preying on her because they liked the guy. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's men or women, like letting bad things happen to women.
This is something that I've wanted to do an episode about a lot, which is how to navigate the environment. And I think that even when guys walk into the environment, they don't fully understand what are every gym has a unique culture, right? Unique policies. Every gym has I think we all kind of share the opinion of like, don't step on the mat with shoes, right? But like there's some gyms bow in, some gyms don't necessarily do that. Gyms are super informal. You call your coach by his name. Like I go by Paul. My students are hey Paul. Like if they forget my name, they call me coach, and I'm like, oh, you forgot my name, right? The other gyms are like, you have to call your head instructor professor or whatever, right? I think it's hard for people that walk into the environment because most people that walk into a martial arts school, their perception of what training is like is so unrealistic to what training is actually like, right? Like they've watched go ahead.
I mean, for me and for I think most of the people that I know who train, they don't even have a perception. There's nothing there in terms of what they expect. So it's just starting from square one. Like, I don't know, I heard of jujitsu.
Yeah.
Like the bowing versus not bowing, that we're only no-gi, that we call somebody professor, that we've got the pictures of like Haleo and everybody on the wall. it almost doesn't even, that stuff doesn't even track, because you would think that if you've got like all these old school, very conservative value type things and we're martial artists, that would mean that it's going to be like a more respectful environment. Not necessarily true at all.
We have this ongoing joke about our gym where I was thinking about putting up a picture of the Cookie Monster. I like cookies, so I was like thinking about doing like just we'd hang up a picture of the Cookie Monster and be like, this is our guy. He loves cookies. But I'm kind of fat. So
well, I mean, I thought that cross training was the devil, because I went to a gym where the first time I ever cross trained somewhere, the guy who took me got kicked out for taking me because cross training was so illegal. And
yeah, I'm 50-50 on that. Depends on the situation.
I can understand why as a competitor there are negatives to cross training, but the idea that an adult can't go and do whatever they want with their life when they leave a training environment that they're paying, it's a hobby. This is not most people's career. And even if they're trying to make it their career, the odds are that it's never going to pay a single bill.
No. Listen, guys, spoiler alert. If you're trying to be a professional fighter, there's no money. Okay. There's no money. There's no money.
You're not going to be Conor McGregor.
It's going to cost me money actually too. So like, we're going to lose money. Okay. I just had a bunch of people fight for world titles, cost me about $4,000 just the world.
There you go.
Something on your point there where like, listen, so I guess I should probably mention this in case someone's listening and thinking about this. I would say that I think there's some really good positives about cross training. And I think there's some really negatives about cross training. And some of the positives are it's fun to go somewhere else and meet other people and see other stuff. And I love to do that. I love going to other seminars. And, if you're training within the same four walls all the time, that can get a little grindy. I mean, obviously martial arts training is grindy in general. So going and, training in a different environment can like kind of eliminate that grind a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think there's any secrets left in martial arts. I think that people that think that they're like, they got some technique that like only they're doing is shut up. Somebody did it in the competition, and if it beat my guy in competition, we're in the gym next week repping it and trying to figure it out. So like, there's no secrets. I think one of the biggest issues is safety, right? Sure. Because there's a lot of gyms where like my guys go in there and they don't know that person, they don't care about that person's safety, and I've been in gyms, I've trained in gyms when I was especially a student, where somebody came in that was a competitor and we were like, fuck that guy up to prove a point, like just to be like, hey, we're the dominant gym. Or, those are the things that I can get concerned about, or bad habits. If you go train in a gym and they're doing something that is legitimately not a good idea, and then you kind of like, you get that poison in your system where all of a sudden you're doing some weird rhythm stepping, which is a terrible idea. And then you take that back in my gym and you start rhythm stepping, and it's like, yo, dude, this has been archaic for 100 years. Why are you doing it now?
But I think like in most of the circumstances that you're referring to, these are people who are taking on a risk and they're the ones who are paying the consequences.
Of course.
To have that communication and say, here's why I don't recommend people cross train, but of course you're welcome to do whatever you want to do, is such a different statement from, we don't cross train at this gym, and if you do, you're kicked out. Like, it's just bizarre.
I mean, look, I get it though. I struggle with it. I understand it. There's nothing worse than like, if we're in camp and we're getting ready a fighter and we're all trying to, as a team, get a fighter ready. And I'm like, oh, I really need so-and-so here because they're better at this than everybody else. And then I go on Instagram and I see that they're training in another gym. And I'm like, dude, I really need you at my gym today. So I get it.
I mean, yeah, but like if you had reached out to that guy beforehand and been like, hey, it's this guy's camp, can you come every day? I bet that guy would have said, hell yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Florida people aren't very loyal.
Maybe that's me having too much faith in people. But I think in general, also, like, I've gotten such a bad taste in my mouth about this sort of culty mentality that I am very aware of the huge drawbacks of not cross training, which definitely include not understanding that there are other cultures that might be a better fit for you, that this is not, whatever you have experienced isn't the only way you can access jujitsu. People really wanted me to believe if I outed this guy that I could never train again. Guess what? still training, never stopped, because Henzo Gracie Association isn't the only way to learn jujitsu, but they really wanted us to believe that it was. Yeah. And they really wanted us to believe that we were the only ones who were good at jujitsu.
I think this is also something that exists, which is there. Okay. I've talked about this on previous episodes where there's this balance of the business of martial arts versus martial arts, right? The business of martial arts is I need you to keep paying. I need you to keep showing up. I need you to tell your friends, I need to win. I need to do this. I need to do that. Make sure you pay your dues, please. And then martial arts itself is very different, right? And the thing I always go back to is if I have a student that comes in and it starts training with us and I'm seeing really positive changes in their life, okay, which happens a lot. You know, I had a guy come in that had a drinking problem, that he was just drinking too much. And like, now he's been sober like 5-6 years. And, you know, he was like, he doesn't even train anymore. But every year on his like sobriety date, he'll like message me and be like, hey, thanks so much, man. I just want you to know, like, you were the catalyst. The program was the catalyst for me to figure out that I can't be drunk every day. And that's a really positive thing.
Sure.
So you see these people that are having really positive moments in their life, and then they can't afford it anymore. And then because the business of martial arts would kind of say to you like, oh, this guy can't, if he can't pay the $150 a month, he can't be here, you know? But you as a martial artist want him to be successful, right? I want everyone that I talk to and everyone I train with to be successful, not just in martial arts, but in life. I always say that, you know, fighting is an allegory for life. All of life is a fight. Life is not fair, just like fights aren't always fair. You have to win in spite of that. Like there's all these components of martial arts that I think are very like spiritual, emotional, mental benefits, fellowship, all these other things that I think that are really important in martial arts. But when that guy can't pay or the girl can't pay or the parents can't pay, we kind of like ostracize them, you know what I mean? In the nicest way possible, you know, hey, like, you know, you can't pay. I hear you. That's tough, dude. It's really tough. I would prefer not to charge. If I could figure out a way to make a living and pay these ridiculous student loans without, you know, charging my students, I think that'd be amazing. You know, but the physical structure of having a building, having a space, having mats, you know, having to pay my power bill, having to pay my water bill, you know, I like to eat food way too much, hence the Cookie Monster. All that costs money, you know? So I think also too, I think sometimes when it comes to cross training and sometimes when it comes to loyalty and sometimes it comes to one of these things, there's almost this fear. Like I know that I have a good product, right? I know that my product is good. Is it great? No, I'll tell you that right now. It could be great. One day it'll be great, but like, I can't just be the one pushing the envelope, right? I need my students. I need my other instructors. I need the people that I'm putting in leadership roles to make it a great environment, right? But, you know, that's hard. That's hard. As a student, I cross-trained all the time. I was at a student at one point, I was training at 3 different gyms and paying for all 3 because I'm crazy. But it's complicated. But I will say this, jiu-jitsu is more that than anywhere else, right? Because like, that's very uncommon. And in a lot of other, like, let's say reality-based kind of real self-defense martial arts, right? Not the stuff where you're kind of punching into a mirror, but in the stuff where it's like, you know, hey, I want to learn how to do this. You go over and you train in a lot of places, right? Or you do a lot of seminars, you do a lot of workshops because, like, you know, if a gun guy comes to town, you want to learn how to shoot a gun, you go to the gun guy. And if there's a knife guy in town, you go to the knife guy. And if you want to learn how to punch, you go to the boxing coach. And if you want to learn how to kick, you go to like the kicking coach. In jiu-jitsu, there is a very much like a feeling sometimes of like, we're the source. Like, this is the only source of your education. And even as someone that's been making YouTube videos now, but I've been around for a really long time, I've heard coaches be like, hey, where'd you learn that? And you're like, oh, I saw it on a video on YouTube. And they're like, don't do that. I'm like, well, what? Like, what do you mean? No, I don't. That's not good. Why is it not good? Because you don't teach it? Like, why? What are you talking about?
I mean, like my whole gym that I was at for 3 years just simply didn't teach entire positions because they were 10th planet shit. Like, and now I go to another gym where they teach 10th planet shit and I'm getting put in a truck position and I don't like it very much. So
screw that 10th planet shit, man.
I mean, but the fact of the matter is different things work for different people and not everybody has to teach everything, but to not let somebody who wants to go learn it, it's cultish. It's just not, knowledge shouldn't be limited to whatever you want me to learn. That I should be able to go out and seek more knowledge than you're willing to provide me with as just a human on earth. And if you don't like the way that if I come back to the gym and I do some shit that's not okay in the gym, there need to be rules in place that teach me I can't, if I learned leg locks and we're not a leg locking gym, then there just need to be rules against leg locking, but it doesn't mean I can't learn them. You know what I mean?
For example, I learned today that there's no toe holds allowed on YouTube videos because of creepers. You today. So
God, oh man, leg locks and YouTube videos and being a girl is just a cesspool in the comments section.
Where do you see your content going from here? Are you going to continue developing the podcast and the TikTok?
To me, and this has been the goal from the beginning of Rear Naked Chicks. The goal has always just been to be as happy as I can be in my martial arts world and to share that with the people who enjoy the same thing I enjoy. Right now, I'm liking making TikToks with Maggie. I love podcasting. That's been fun. And it's not, it's not lucrative, but it's reaching a lot of people. And I'm just going to keep doing it as long as it makes sense. I really do. I've got a lead on some mat space and I really do want to start developing that aspect of things. I think that bringing jujitsu to a women's only environment would encourage people who have no interest in competition or any sort of, boys club, just women who want to get in shape and learn some practical self-defense. And it's just a fun sport, honestly, even if it's just for the logical puzzle that is jujitsu and getting good exercise during that. I kind of just want another environment because it's been so fraught to have to deal with all of the politics of jujitsu with, the old associations and the men versus women and the competition and everything. I kind of just want to go train with people who are interested in training.
Yeah. No, I get that. But then that becomes, the difference of the business of martial arts versus just martial arts,
Right.
We've had this conversation a lot. When we left our gym and we kind of were debating what we were going to do next. And I was are we a content platform that's going to produce content and have a fight team? Or are we going to be open to the general public and we're going to try to, get as many members as we humanly can to get the biggest facility so that we have the most resources to be a better fight team and make better content, right? Because, this podcast studio I built cost $5,000, which, by the way, I probably could have done for about $2,500 now that I really think about it. And some of my students, some of my athletes were let's just be in the park, man. We can just work. We can train in your garage. We can do this, and I get that. And to be honest with you, my athletes are going to train regardless. Right. They're going to, if we're training in the park or we're training in a garage or we're training in the pool, we'll figure out a way to do it. When it comes to the other people, that's harder, I'll tell you another thing. I want to do, a women's self-defense series. I want to do I don't know how I'm going to structure it yet, but I have, multiple female athletes that I'm trying to develop. And one of the ways that you develop athletes, in my opinion, or you develop students in general, is empowering them to take the material they're learning and then teach it themselves and figure out ways to spread that information themselves. Just like in college, when I was in, undergrad and I was learning something, it was a whole lot easier to, get the anatomical model and start explaining it to one of your peers. I want to develop a women's self-defense series, but even then I struggle with what does that look like? What is that? How do we structure that? Like, what is the best way to teach that? If you learn martial arts for 6 weeks, like what competency have you really developed, right? Maybe you developed a certain amount of positive mental health, positive mental experience from it, but like, are you competently able to defend yourself against an aggressor? How much of how much of violence is stress induced violence, right? Like where you're fighting because and you're struggling with sensory perception and tunnel vision and audio disturbance because you're in a high stress environment. First, how much of fighting is technical proficiency? And this is something that I've been debating with my female athletes and my female students and my clients that are more fitness based, along with some of my male counterparts. And like, hey, what's too much? What's enough? You know what I mean? Like there's a school down the street that's like more like a Krav Maga school, and they teach you how to prevent being like put in someone's trunk. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. I mean, it makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think
want to do that, but I'm with you.
There's never going to be any perfect one size fits all solution to like women's self-defense, right? Like I think to just start trying things and see what's working for people. And I think a huge part of the problem that I've like encountered in my martial arts journey has been people's insistence that one way is the way to do things and we don't question it and you can't talk about it. I think everything has room for improvement. Every person has room for improvement. And if you're not able to like work on things and develop them as time goes along, you're just going to be left, in the past with, every other thing that never got fixed. So I'm from Silicon Valley. Like I grew up in the whole, .com boom. My dad was a big .com guy and he had a lot of startups, and there's this whole idea of the MVP, right? The minimum viable product. And like, you just start from somewhere that works and then you improve on it. And so that, I think for anything, whether it's a gym or a, women's self-defense series or anything, you got to start somewhere and you have to be willing to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm wrong about 12 times a day, not more. Listen, this is something too I talk about a lot, where we become so afraid of failure as a society that it's like I talk to people all the time, and I'm like, "Oh, you should do that. You want to do that? You should do that." And they're like, "Oh, what if I fail? Who cares, man? Like no one watches my videos. I just keep making them. Let's be honest. When someone's like, "Oh, I watched your video," I'm like, "You really? You watched the whole thing?" I think if I do a 10-minute video, the average watch time is like, a minute and a half. I'm like, oh, awesome. They got a minute and a half into my video. That's amazing.
Nobody has any attention span anymore anyway.
I don't either. I put stuff on. Someone explained to me that I could watch videos on like 1.5. Oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Or like people will tell me that they listen to my podcast. That was like an hour podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, it wasn't bad. I knocked it out over lunch. And I'm like, how'd you do that? Like, oh, I listened to it at 2.0 speed. And I'm like, oh, so I got to slow down.
I listen to podcasts when I do basically everything. Like I don't like silence ever. So I always have, if I'm doing something that requires my like visual attention, like driving or cooking, I listen to podcasts. And if I'm doing something that is like folding laundry, then I'll have TV on. Like I'm consuming something.
Yeah. I had like the best and the worst compliment, which was this guy commented on one of my like podcasts that like he would listen to my videos to go to sleep. I was like, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
There's comfort. Hey, to me, the only things I can listen to going to sleep are my very most favorite, like tried and true recordings of anything.
Yeah, I guess. All right, Jordan. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me, having never spoken to me before. You don't know this, but we created like the Combat Theory clothing line, or maybe you do know this. And it was kind of because you guys started putting out clothing, and I think
no way.
You, and I was like, "Hey, how are you doing this?" And you're like,
"Oh, that was you."
Yeah, you're like, "I'm using this print on demand website," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool," And we have since developed like a whole line of Combat Theory rash guards and T-shirts and shorts and all this other stuff, and it's print on demand, so it's a little consistent, a little inconsistent, depending. But yeah, you guys had a really positive effect on the journey of combat theory so far. So I hope that you keep putting out content in spite of all of the kind of recent backlash that you've had. And I have read some of your comments too and felt like, fuck these people. But
I mean, for every, like, it's funny because the negative ones stick in your head, but for every negative one, there's 20 good ones. And I gotta just keep on going.
Yeah, no, keep pushing forward, man. I thank you again so much. I would, I know Calcucate had messaged me about maybe the three of you guys doing a podcast, or maybe the three of us, I should say, doing a podcast in the future. And I would be down for that if you're interested.
For sure.
And it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.